I count everything now. I count the cracks in the ceiling above my cot. I count the seconds between artillery salvos. I count the breaths of the men sleeping in the bunker around me, and when those breaths stop in the night, I count the silence until someone screams. The Medicae says this is common among siege survivors, this compulsion to enumerate the world into manageable pieces. She says it will fade with time, but she has never been to a fortress world. She has never spent 9 years watching the same walls from the same trench, counting the same dead faces day after day, until the numbers themselves become a kind of prayer. My name is Marcus Thorne. I was born on an agri-world called Delphia Tertius, where I counted stalks of grain during harvest season and thought that was tedious work. I was 19 when the tithe masters came for their due, and I was loaded onto a transport with 11,000 other young men and women who had never held a weapon. We were told we were going to serve the Emperor in a great crusade. We were told the campaign would last perhaps a year, 2 at most. We were told many things. The fortress world had a name once. I knew it when I arrived, but somewhere in the 3rd year of the siege, I stopped using it. We all did. It became simply the world or the walls, or, more often, nothing at all. You do not name the thing that is killing you. You do not give it that power. What I remember of those first days is the smell. Not the smell of death, though that came later in quantities I still cannot describe. The smell of that world was promethium and incense, machine oil and corpse starch rations, and beneath it all, something older. Something that had been burning for centuries before we arrived. The fortress world had been a shrine once, a place of pilgrimage where the faithful came to kneel before the bones of saints. By the time the Death Korps and the line regiments landed, those shrines had become bunkers, and the bones of saints were indistinguishable from the bones of traitors. I was assigned to the 447th Delphian Rifles, a regiment that existed for exactly 14 months before it was folded into a consolidated unit with survivors from 6 other shattered formations. We called ourselves the Patchwork after that. Nobody bothered to give us an official designation. Nobody expected us to last long enough to need one. Travis Kellerman was my sergeant. He was not from Delphia. I never learned where he was from, and in 9 years of fighting beside him, I never thought to ask. There are questions you do not ask in siege warfare, and the past is one of them. The past is a luxury. The past is a place where you had a family and a home and a reason to believe tomorrow would be different from today. Travis understood this better than anyone. He had no past. He simply was, as constant and immutable as the walls we were trying to break and the walls that kept breaking us. I remember the first time I killed a man. It was the 4th month of the siege, during an assault on a secondary fortification that military intelligence had designated Objective Kappa 7. We had been told the position was lightly defended. We had been told our artillery had already neutralized most of the resistance. We had been told the engagement would last perhaps 3 hours. By the time we reached the outer trenches, we had lost 200 men to mines alone, and the defenders were waiting for us with crew-served weapons and the kind of calm that comes from knowing you are already dead. The man I killed was wearing the same uniform I was. That was the first thing I noticed. The same flak armor, the same olive drab fatigues, the same Imperial aquila stamped into the metal of his helmet. He had been one of us once, before whatever madness had taken the fortress world turned him into something else. I put my bayonet through his throat because he was trying to put his through mine, and when he fell, I counted the seconds it took him to die. 17. I counted his breaths as they became gurgles and then became nothing. I counted the blood pooling around my boots. I counted because if I did not count, I would have to think, and thinking would have killed me faster than any enemy blade. Travis found me afterward, still standing over the body, still counting under my breath. He did not say anything. He simply put his hand on my shoulder and waited until I was ready to move. That was the first lesson he taught me. Survival is not about courage or skill or faith. Survival is about knowing when to stop and when to keep going, and the wisdom to understand that sometimes those are the same thing. The siege was not one battle. It was 10,000 battles, each one indistinguishable from the last, each one claiming lives in numbers that would have seemed impossible on any other world. We measured progress not in kilometers or objectives, but in bodies. Our bodies, their bodies. Bodies stacked in trenches, and bodies burned in pits, and bodies left to rot in no man's land until even the bones were ground to powder by the endless artillery. The commander spoke of acceptable casualty ratios and strategic attrition, and other phrases designed to make mathematics out of murder. I learned to tune out those words. I learned to count only what mattered: the men beside me, the rounds in my magazine, the steps between my position and the nearest cover. There was a boy in my squad named Devon Marsh. He was 17 when he arrived, a replacement shipped in during the second year to fill one of the gaps that never stopped appearing in our roster. Devon reminded me of my younger brother, the one I had left behind on Delphia Tertius, the one whose face I could no longer quite remember. Devon had the same way of smiling at inappropriate moments, the same nervous habit of touching his lasgun's stock as if to reassure himself it was real. I tried not to get attached. Everyone tried not to get attached. Attachment was another luxury we could not afford. Devon lasted 8 months. He died during a tunnel assault, in the darkness beneath the fortress walls where the siege had taken on a different character entirely. The tunnels were Travis's domain. He volunteered for every subterranean mission, every expedition into the labyrinthine network of passages that the enemy had carved beneath the surface. When I asked him why, he just smiled and said that the tunnels were honest. Above ground, you could lie to yourself. You could pretend the bombardment would stop, pretend the assault would succeed, pretend the war would end before it ended you. In the tunnels, there were no lies, only darkness and the things that lived in it. I went into the tunnels once, only once. That was enough. We were breaching a section that intelligence believed connected to the enemy's primary ammunition stores. The plan was simple: plant the charges, collapse the tunnel, cut off their supply lines. The plan was always simple. Reality was always complicated. What we found down there was not an ammunition store. What we found was a shrine, or what had once been a shrine before the inhabitants of the fortress world had remade it in the image of their new masters. The walls were covered in script I could not read, prayers to entities I could not name, written in substances I did not want to identify. There were bodies arranged in patterns on the floor, pilgrims who had been dead for years but had not decayed, their faces fixed in expressions of ecstatic agony. And there was sound, coming from somewhere deeper in the tunnel network, a kind of chanting that seemed to bypass my ears entirely and resonate directly in my skull. Travis grabbed my arm and dragged me back before I could go further. His face was pale in the glow of our stab lights, and for the first time since I had known him, I saw something like fear in his eyes. "Don't listen," he said. "Don't look, just move." We collapsed that tunnel and sealed it. With Ferrocrete, Command marked it on their maps as neutralized and moved on to the next objective. But I still hear that chanting sometimes, in the moments between sleep and waking, in the silence between artillery shells. I still wonder what would have happened if I had kept walking. The years blurred together after that. I stopped counting days and started counting seasons, then stopped counting seasons and started counting offensives. There were 9 major assaults during my time on the fortress world. Each one promised to be the final push, each one ending in the same stalemate, the same trenches, the same faces dying around me. I watched the patchwork rise and fall and rise again, absorbing casualties and replacements in an endless cycle that made the concept of unit cohesion meaningless. The only constant was Travis, always there, always leading the charge, always coming back when others did not. I asked him once how he did it, how he survived when everyone around him fell. He was cleaning his weapon at the time, a ritual he performed every night with the same mechanical precision, and he did not look up when he answered. "I made a deal," he said. I waited for him to elaborate, but he never did. It became another question I learned not to ask. The siege changed everyone who survived it, but the changes were not always visible. Some men came back missing limbs or eyes or pieces of their skulls, their bodies rebuilt by the decay with cybernetics that whirred and clicked in the night. Some men came back whole on the outside but hollow on the inside. their souls scraped out by years of horror, until nothing remained but the reflexes of soldiers. And some men came back different in ways that defied explanation, touched by something in the tunnels or the trenches or the endless bombardments, carrying secrets that they would never share. I think I became the third kind. I cannot point to a moment when it happened, cannot identify the experience that broke. Whatever part of me was still capable of feeling. It happened gradually, in increments so small I did not notice until it was too late. One day I was a frightened conscript counting the seconds between shells. The next day I was a veteran who had forgotten how to fear, and somewhere between those days something else happened, something I still do not fully understand. The 5th year was the worst. That was when the commissariat began its purges, executing any soldier suspected of wavering faith or insufficient fervor. The definitions of those crimes were flexible enough to encompass anyone the commissars chose to target, and the trials were conducted with the same bureaucratic efficiency as everything else in the Imperium. I watched men I had fought beside for years dragged before firing squads for crimes as trivial as questioning the day's orders, or failing to maintain proper uniform standards during a bombardment. I learned to keep my mouth shut. I learned to keep my head down. I learned to count the executions and add them to all the other numbers crowding my skull. Travis was accused once, a junior commissar, fresh from the Schola Progenium and eager to prove his dedication, decided that the sergeant's survival record was evidence of some sort of collaboration with the enemy. The logic was insane. How could any man live through so many engagements unless he was somehow protected by the forces we were fighting against? The trial lasted less than an hour. Travis said nothing in his defense. He simply stood at attention while the commissar recited the charges, his face as blank as the walls of the fortress we had been trying to breach for half a decade. I was certain he would be shot. I had already begun counting the men who would need to absorb his responsibilities, already begun calculating how the squad would function without him. Then something strange happened. The senior commissar, a man named Aldrich Crane who had been on the world almost as long as we, had intervened. He dismissed the charges, publicly reprimanded his subordinate, and ordered Travis returned to active duty. When I asked the sergeant about it later, he just smiled that same enigmatic smile. "Crane knows," he said. "Crane has always known." Known what? I never found out. But I noticed that after that day, the commissars gave Travis a wide berth. They watched him sometimes, when they thought he was not looking, and their faces held an expression I had never seen on a commissar before: uncertainty. The 7th year brought the first genuine progress in the siege. The enemy was running out of supplies, running out of men, running out of the will to keep fighting. Our offensives began to take ground and hold it, pushing the lines of trenches ever closer to the inner walls of the fortress complex. Command spoke of victory in terms of months rather than years, and for the first time since I had arrived, I allowed myself to imagine a future beyond the siege. That was when they offered me the promotion. I did not want it. I had seen what happened to officers on the fortress world. They died faster than anyone else, targeted by snipers and daemon engines, and the random cruelty of chance. The officers who survived were changed in ways that made survival seem like a worse fate than death. They became hard and cold and distant, isolated from the men they commanded by the weight of decisions that would crush anyone who let themselves feel. But refusal was not an option. In the Imperial Guard, you went where you were told and did what you were ordered, and if those orders put you in a position of authority, you accepted that authority and carried it until it killed you. So I took the officers' pins they gave me and tried not to count the days until a sniper's round or a stray shell solved my problem permanently. Travis congratulated me in his own way. He told me I would need to learn to lie better. Officers tell stories, he said. They tell the men that victory is possible, that their deaths will mean something, that the Emperor is watching and the campaign is just. The good officers believe those stories. The great officers know their lies but tell them anyway. "What about the ones like you?" I asked. "The ones who survive?" He looked at me for a long moment, and something flickered in his eyes that might have been amusement or might have been sorrow. I could never tell with Travis. We tell different stories, he said. Stories the men don't want to hear. I thought about that conversation a great deal in the months that followed. I thought about it when I ordered assaults I knew would fail, sending men to their deaths because the alternative was admitting that 9 years of sacrifice had been for nothing. I thought about it when I wrote letters to families who would never receive them, telling lies about heroic last stands and meaningful deaths. I thought about it when I stood in the command bunker and watched the strategic displays track our progress toward the inner fortress, each blinking icon representing a company, or a battalion, or a regiment that would be ground to dust against those ancient walls. And I thought about it when I finally understood what Travis had meant about the deal he had made. It happened during the assault on the secondary citadel in the 8th year of the siege. This was supposed to be the breakthrough, the moment when we finally cracked the enemy's defenses and opened the path to the heart of the fortress. 17 regiments participated in the assault. Mine was among them. The fighting was unlike anything I had experienced in 9 years of war. The enemy had nothing left to lose, and they fought with a desperation that bordered on the supernatural. Men who should have been dead kept fighting. Weapons that should have been dry kept firing. The walls themselves seemed to resist us, every stone and every shadow hiding some new horror. I lost my company in the first hour. I lost my battalion in the second. By the third hour, I was commanding a handful of survivors from a dozen different units, holding a position in a ruined chapel while the world collapsed around us. That was when I saw Travis for the last time. He came out of the smoke and the chaos like a ghost, his uniform torn and scorched, his face streaked with blood that might have been his own or might have belonged to others. He was alone. Every soldier who had followed him into the assault was dead, but he was smiling. "The tunnels are open," he said. "The way is clear." I did not understand what he meant. I did not understand why he was smiling when everyone around us was dying. I did not understand the way he looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time, as if everything that had happened between us for the past 9 years had been leading to this moment. "Come with me," he said. "I'll show you how to survive." I should have gone. Part of me wanted to go, wanted to follow him into whatever darkness he had found beneath the fortress walls, wanted to learn the secret that had kept him alive through all those years of horror. But something held me back, some instinct, some remnant of the faith I had thought died long ago, some voice in my head that sounded like my mother telling me that some prices are too high. "I can't," I said. Travis nodded. He did not seem surprised. If anything, he seemed almost relieved. "Then you'll have to find your own way," he said. "Just remember, the counting won't save you. Nothing saves you. You just survive until you don't, and then you find out what comes next." He walked back into the smoke. I never saw him again. When the assault was over and the secondary citadel finally fell, his body was not among the recovered dead. The official records list him as missing in action, presumed killed, another number to add to the endless tallies that measured our progress in lives. But I know better. I know he found what he was looking for in those tunnels. I know the deal he made was finally paid. The siege ended 7 months later, not with a triumphant assault or a dramatic surrender, but with the quiet exhaustion of an enemy that had finally run out of everything. The last defenders surrendered in small groups, hollow-eyed men and women who looked as broken as we felt. There was no celebration, there was no relief, there was only the strange emptiness of purpose that comes when the thing you have been doing for nearly a decade suddenly stops. I stood on the walls of the inner fortress on the day they declared the campaign officially concluded. Below me, the trenches stretched to the horizon, a maze of scars carved into the earth by 9 years of continuous warfare. The ground was grey with ash and promethium residue. Nothing would grow there for generations. The entire world had been rendered sterile, sacrificed on the altar of a war that had cost millions of lives and achieved nothing except the elimination of a threat that had never needed to exist in the first place. Commissar Crane found me there, staring at the devastation. He was older than I remembered, his face lined with the weight of years spent dispensing the Emperor's justice in a place where justice had no meaning. But his eyes were sharp, and when he looked at me, I had the strange sense that he was seeing something beyond my face. "You survived," he said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir. Kellerman told me you would. He said you were different, special. Crane tilted his head, studying me like a specimen. He told me a great many things about you, Lieutenant Thorne. Things that I found difficult to believe at the time. With respect, sir, Travis said a great many things that were difficult to believe. Indeed. Crane reached into his coat and withdrew a sealed envelope, the kind used for classified communications between senior officers. He also left you this. Told me to deliver it if you survived the assault on the Citadel. Said you would. Understand what it meant. I took the envelope but did not open it. Something told me that whatever was inside would change everything, would answer questions I had been asking for 9 years and raise new ones I was not prepared to face. What did he tell you? I asked. About me? Crane smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a man who has seen too much, who knows too much, who has made his own deals with the darkness. He told me you would survive because you know how to count. He said the counting keeps you anchored, keeps you from drifting into places where you shouldn't go. He said that was rare. Most men who see what you've seen, who do what you've done, they lose their grip. They fall into the cracks between what's real and what's waiting in those tunnels. Crane's smile faded. He also told me that someday the counting wouldn't be enough, that someday you would have to choose just like he chose. Choose what? Whether to stay anchored or let go. He left me alone on the walls after that, standing among the ruins of a world that had consumed 9 years of my life and millions of lives besides. I held the envelope in my hands and counted my breaths, counted my heartbeats, counted the seconds until the sun set and the stars emerged from behind the chemical haze that perpetually shrouded the fortress world. Then I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in the same script I had seen in the tunnels all those years ago. I should not have been able to read it. I had never studied those symbols, never learned their meanings, never allowed myself to look closely enough to recognize their patterns. But I read it anyway, the words forming themselves in my mind with a clarity that terrified me. It was a map to a place beneath the fortress, beneath the tunnels, beneath everything that existed on the surface of that broken world. A place that the siege had never touched because the siege had never known it was there. A place where Travis Kellerman was waiting for me, just as he had waited for 9 years, just as he would wait forever if I never came. I burned the map. I watched the paper curl and blacken and crumble to ash, and I counted the seconds until nothing remained but smoke. Then I walked away. That was 15 years ago. I am an old man now, or feel like one. The years since the siege have passed in a blur of reassignments and campaigns and bureaucratic postings that keep me far from any front line. I have risen through the ranks not through merit, but through the simple fact of survival, each promotion a reminder that I have outlived the men who were supposed to replace me. I have medals and commendations and a service record that spans decades. I have everything the Imperium considers success. And I still count. I count the cracks in my quarters. I count the footsteps of the guards outside my door. I count the prayers broadcast over the ship's voxcasters, measuring the rhythm of devotion that structures every day in the Imperial Navy. I count because the counting is the only thing that keeps me here, in this world, in this life, instead of the one that Travis offered. Sometimes, in the moments before sleep claims me, I wonder if I made the right choice. I wonder what I would have found in that place beneath the fortress, what secrets Travis had uncovered in his years of walking through the darkness. I wonder if survival was worth the price, if anchoring myself to the numbers and the routines and the grinding mundanity of Imperial service was better than letting go. I think about Devon Marsh, who died in the tunnels at 17. I think about the thousands of soldiers I served with, the ones whose names I have forgotten and the ones whose faces I will carry until my own death. I think about the fortress world, still there, still scarred, still bearing the wounds of a siege that achieved nothing but the perpetuation of suffering. And I think about what Travis said, that last day you just survive until you don't, and then you find out what comes next. I am still surviving, I am still counting. But I know, with the certainty that only comes from years of waiting, that someday the counting will stop, Someday I will reach a number so large that my mind cannot hold it any longer, and then I will have to face what lies beyond. I do not know if I am afraid of that moment or looking forward to it. Perhaps there is no difference. Perhaps fear and anticipation are just two more numbers to add to the tally, two more marks in the endless ledger of a life spent in service to an empire that does not care whether I live or die. But until then, I count. 1, 2, 3. The cracks in the ceiling, the seconds between breaths, the years since I walked away from the only man who ever understood what this war made me. 4, 5, 6. The prayers, the promotions, the dead faces that visit me in dreams. 7, 8, 9. The years of the siege, the lives it consumed, the thing that waits in the tunnels, patient and eternal, counting along with me. Because that is what it means to be a guardsman, that is what it means to survive. You count because counting is order, and order is the only defense against the chaos that lurks at the edges of everything. You count because if you stop, you will have to face the silence, and the silence is worse than any number. You count because in the end, numbers are all we have. I am still counting. I will count until I cannot count anymore. And then perhaps I will finally find out what Travis meant when he smiled in that burning chapel and told me the way was clear. The siege ended 15 years ago. But for me, standing in the darkness of my quarters, listening to the hum of the ship's engines and the distant chant of evening prayers, the siege has never ended at all. It simply moved inside. And there, in the trenches of my own mind, the war continues. 1, 2, 3.